Yeah. Okay. We've got 18 folks in. I'm going to take a few minutes here. I'm going to introduce Tom Olin. This is our Thursday webinar series that we've been doing for a couple of months now, especially through the COVID thing. So today, this whole month, we're honoring the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is our civil rights law. And so I have the honor of introducing and presenting with Tom Olin. Tom Olin is the social documentarian for the disability rights movement. He's been doing this since the early 80s. And he has amassed an amazing collection of photographs, and we have those archived at the Ward M. Kennedy Center for Special Collections in the Carlson Library at the University of Toledo. And when I say it's a large collection, it's actually, you know, they go by linear feet, and Tom has 37 linear feet of photos and slides and negatives and paraphernalia from over the years that are housed there. And I have the honor and pleasure to help manage Tom's artwork and his stuff through my job at the Ability Center. So as I'm Dan Wilkins, and I'm the Director of Special Projects for the Ability Center. Tom's photos, as I get started here, Tom's photos are in demand, especially now with the 30th anniversary of the ADA upon us. His photos live in many places. The Smithsonian is one place. The Visitor Center of the U.S. Capitol is another place. In civil rights museums, from Little Rock High School to the National Civil Rights Museum in the Lorraine Hotel in Memphis, and the Center for Civil and Human Rights in Atlanta. I share Tom's artwork as far away as Poland and Japan and Australia. We've designed murals that's used in photos, books. There's just not any place, any medium that doesn't have a little bit of Tom's work in it. So as we ramp up to this 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, I'm happy and honored to have Tom here to look at and share some of the moments, some of the people, some of the stories, the events, especially the people of the movement. You know, when you think about disability culture, it's a small family, but a diverse world, and it's a mighty family. And so a lot of us seem to know each other. And Tom, I think, knows pretty much everybody. And everybody knows Tom. So over the years, Tom has captured so many issues from transportation, struggle for transportation access, to nursing homes and deinstitutionalization, from assisted suicide, not dead yet, to healthcare and employment and the disincentives to employment, community living, Mikasa, all of that, all over the country. So he's been pretty much everywhere. A lot of us know Tom as someone who will stop by for a weekend on his way somewhere. And I have the pleasure of having a Tom Olin room at the top of our stairs. So I always look forward to his visits. Tom came into this post 504, so we don't have anything from the time of Judy Heumann and the sit-ins and all of that stuff. Tom came in the 80s, about 5 years later. So with that, I want to start this today with a bit of an homage to Tom and also to Reverend Wade Blank, who he's probably the heart and soul. Tom, you want to say anything about Wade?
Oh, what a lovely soul he was. Yeah. For the movement, I'm really glad that you do have a picture up. That memorial right there was something from the Gang of 19, that people that a lot of the persons that he had gotten out of a nursing home. And you could say that that time was basically our really the grassroots start of disability rights. Before that, there was a lot of students and organizations for us and with us at times. Uh, Movement, and before that, I guess you could, the what, there were a few movements. Was it the what movement am I thinking of?
The
Yeah,
independent
independent
movement.
living movement. Well, and so they kind of worked together at times, but they had their separate origins also. You could always call disability rights. I think we all had that. We all knew that we were separate, and we wanted to be kind of part of the regular civil rights movement. But we still did not have the rights as when the other civil rights were allowed to African Americans and to other Americans. We did not have those rights yet. And so this is some of the beginnings. And Wade was from the civil rights movement. Actually, he was also during the Vietnam, he had a restaurant. Well, it's called Ellis's Restaurant. It was actually the gateway for a lot of people to, students to go to Canada at that time. And he saw in his heart, he was on some of the freedom rides in the South, marched with Martin Luther King. So he had a very interesting philosophy. I mean, he was a ordained minister also, and he kind of put all what you could tell all of that together, civil disobedience from Gandhi and from Martin Luther King, into something that he kind of brought in his mind and his soul to Denver, where that plaque you see on the left, where he finally ended up living.
Right, and then I know he had worked in a nursing home. He got fired for wanting to help people to get out of it, and he was the one that said, nobody wants to live in a nursing home. That should tell us something. So yeah, Wade was actually, he's probably the heart and soul of the disability rights movement, and it did separate from the IL movement. That was Ed Roberts and the Rolling Quads back in 1962, getting into UC Berkeley. This bunch, Ed was wanting to go to school. These people were just wanting to live. So so there is two of those. There's a separation, but there was a lot of overlap. So let's move on to start looking at some of your photos here. This was from LA.
Yes, this is LA. You can. This is the first action that I participated in with ADAPT. You can see Wade in the left standing up with his arms crossed in the background, and also on the left. I guess Wade was on the right, but you see Diane Coleman sitting in her chair with a California Association of Physically Handicapped sign. That was, I was living with Diane at that time, and this was our first direct action as such. And then we participated in a lot of, this is LA too. Public transit is a civil right. This is a local transit agency out of Torrance. It was really hard in LA, no one walks in LA for sure. Yeah, you get into places like Berkeley and other places, it's kind of easier to travel around to one place to the other place, but LA, buses were essential, very essential. So you had buses, and you can also notice a curb there. On the right picture is a person that is being transported by the police after this was 1985 at the Bonaventure Hotel. Adapt came to town. Ken Hurd was out of Arizona. And at that time, Adapt had a lot of, were very much into transportation, into disability rights when it came to being able to get around in your city. So
Well,
at that point,
it was a link to everything, link to housing, link to the stores, link just as it is today, link to jobs, link to healthcare. So if you couldn't get around in a big city like LA, well, then that was a real problem for people, a real disincentive to participating and living.
Now, and what happened, in Denver with Wade, when he got everybody out of the institution there and got them into the community, they found out right away that, well, it's good to be in your apartment or in your house. But if you can't go anywhere, so they decided, okay, well, we need to go places. And so you had your first demonstrations in Denver on that. And Denver itself was one of the first cities to become, because of all the protests there, was one of the first accessible cities with public transportation. On the left here, you can see a person with, this is an iconic picture. This kind of really, during this time, during the early 80s, this really set the mood of disability rights activists. There was a difference between the advocacy, which was happening across the US at that time because of the 504 regulations that we were, that the Senate produced and confirmed, but not enacted.
Right.
Or you could say not, or no teeth in it yet. But back then, the activists took to the streets. And this is a picture of a person's hand. Actually, it's Bob Kafka's hands behind his wheelchair. And it just became a symbol of what a person might do, and the empowerment that kind of followed for the grassroots. At this time, a lot of, you can see here, and the empowerment went into many different arenas. And one of the actions that a lot of people took was to the streets, to the curbs. About a week before this action in LA on the Walk of Fame, which we call it the Walk of Shame, as you can see someone hammering the curb and busting up the curb there. That curb was over 10, 12, 10, I think it was 10 inches high, which you couldn't even jump it if you were a para chair. But this is an interesting picture because you had a lot of great people in that picture. You had Carol Gill in the
Carol Gill in the hat in the back.
One of the leaders with Paul Longmore. Yeah, she and Paul were one of the early persons with disability studies. And you have Barbara Waxman on the very upper left. She was one of the earliest female feminists in our movement. You also had Diane Piastro, right in front. You have Diane Coleman, and right right next to her was Diane Piastro, one of the very first persons to have a dating service for people with disabilities online. And she was also a journalist, and actually had a lot of controversy throughout.
Yeah, with the writing,
the media. Here, this is still the curb cuts or barrier busters.
Yeah.
Named
Where
busting
this
the curbs.
happened. Yeah, where this happened was right on the Walk of Fame, the Hollywood Walk of Fame. So this was a street theater was something that was employed quite often.
Right.
In the movement.
Right. And theater was very important to get the media to actually recognize us because people with disabilities weren't recognized very much at all, for a very, very long time. And so definitely when it came to civil rights, there were things that you could put out there that, here, you couldn't get up the ramps. I was starting to say a week before this action, a person, how you would get from in a chair to one side of the street to another side, or when you're at the corner to across the corners, you would have to find a driveway, an alley before you got to the corner to get out to the street, and then roll down to the corner and then across at the lights at that point. And then you would have to get on the other side and then find an alley to get back up on the sidewalk. But a week before that, someone did that, got out in his chair into the traffic and got killed. So it was very apropos to have this demonstration at that point. And you see a policeman on the left photo, just not really understanding what to do.
Right.
And then you had the
early
ramp
on,
there.
they didn't know what to do.
Here's people. No, they did ticket us at that point, but we got to make this ramp also at one of the other corners. Access now. Build access for all, one of the signs say. And it was great. It was a great show. And then after we got that together and we're all up on the curb, a bus came by and wiped it out.
Okay.
It was a good photo shot shoot at that point.
Sure. And then over the next couple of weeks and months, we did it just started to build, and you had this here is San Antonio.
Yeah, this is outside of the Alamo. You can just see parts of the Alamo in the background. This is actually the lady that is walking with her Canadian crutch there, an African American. She was the director of the Independent Living Center down in San Antonio. That was San Antonio. Here we were at Phoenix, Arizona. The fellow on the left had disability studies, taught disability studies there, or classes. They haven't really had a program yet. And the lady on the right was wheelchair miss. A lot of times, this was an ADAPT action. A lot of times when ADAPT would come to town, you would have some support. Not all the time. A lot of times you had SILs that were just scared of you. They were scared that we might cause them to lose respect or something. There's a lot of timidity and disability at that time. Arizona was a little different. They actually came out and supported this. And when we left, actually, we had a letter at Disability Rags talking about, or the director at the Independent Living Centers talking about how it was much easier after we left to be able to talk to the state government and to the city government because we were the black sheep. ADAPT was the black sheep, at
Sure, the
militant
family,
disability rights family. Yeah. And I mean, this is still Phoenix. This is outside the
Maricopa.
Maricopa, I
Maricopa,
can't pronounce it, County, Maricopa
the
County.
jail.
And inside, we inside that jail, we had people for 5 days. We had people that were quads that were getting not very good care at the time. And this is a time when people actually spent during the fight for the ADA in the adapt world, and all the places we went to, we had over 1,000 people put in being arrested time. And this was a press conference with Diane Coleman, and around also that you don't see is also the other groups, some secular groups. Also, they had the Gray Panthers that supported us back then. So it was a very intense stay in Phoenix at that point. The police used a lot of money to kind of suppress what we were doing, and it didn't always work. We did get media attention for the cause at that point, and it was a lot. A lot was, of course, what was happening at that time is the one thing that we can really show what civil rights is all about for us is our lack of transportation. And it goes right back to the roots of the African American civil rights movement, when they were saying, well, we don't want to sit on the back of the bus. Well, we could just say, well, we can't even get on the bus.
And
So
you do have an
this is
iconic photo, which I forgot to include in this, and it's my fault, but yeah, there is somebody with that on the back of his chair saying we can't even get on the bus. So
yes.
it was a time.
That way,
so.
I mean, a lot of people could understand that this was a civil rights movement. I mean, it's still, during all this, a lot of times people were out of sight and out of mind. But as you can see in this photo, there was a lot of people there. This is San Francisco. And of course, you had Berkeley on the other side of the Bay Area. We had a lot of good support at that actions here. And you can see here's another person with a sign, we will ride. We have the ride to work.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that happened. Our crowd started getting bigger. The people that came out to support ADAPT, it just kept growing with that media attention.
It was so, I mean, and the thing is that in our world and not only in the United States, but in our world of schools and communities. I'm in LA. This is another picture of San Francisco. But in LA, I was a teacher's aide in special ed, and I remember bringing a book out to a child who happened to be the only person in the school, elementary school, that used a chair. And I opened up to this book, and he looked at a picture like you had just saw, with a whole bunch of people in wheelchairs, and he just looked up at me and he said, "Mike, I didn't know there were more than 50 people in the whole world, that use wheelchairs. Our people just didn't know who we were, and through a lot of the actions, we put our faces and our disability on front pages, and that it wasn't the Tiny Tims, it wasn't us pleading for money, it wasn't a telethon that was in the news. It was us right in this picture right here, holding the barricade right with the police. We were as powerful, we were go on and fight for civil rights. That's a very powerful, thing to do. And for a kid to look at that. Actually, that was in San Francisco too. When the kid, he was in 5th grade, he turned the page And the next page was from the Time magazine, their article in Time magazine of the San Francisco
We're having a hard time with it.
action, had said, and that young kid looked at me and said, he smiled and said, "I can be a wheelchair warrior."
Would yeah.
That was a great moment. This is I think this is in St. Louis, and during this time, one of the big hits that we were trying to that we could own. Greyhounds did not want to make their buses accessible, and they were not public, they were private, so they said they didn't really have to. So we definitely wanted to hit them, and rightly so. For a lot of people in rural America, you could only go from one city to the other city if you're in a wheelchair, by a Greyhound, if you want. So Greyhounds were a matter of very importance to the disability community. So they were a good target. A lot of times when they were a good target, that meant that we could, this one was going to Tijuana, it was definitely, St. Louis is like in mid USA, so it was a hub for Greyhound, and you stopped the buses in St. Louis, and that meant that the schedules for all across the U.S. were definitely later, much later, from that time on. So it was always a good hit to hit the Greyhound.
Mm-hmm.
It was such a good hit that this was during one of the days of national Greyhound hits, and
it was a coordinated effort.
Coordinated effort throughout the U.S. One of the things about ADAPT is there were many chapters throughout the state. It wasn't just one little local group. ADAPT was made up of a lot of people that, one of the difference between the independent living movement in the start was that in the start of either of the movements, one was made up of a lot of young students, that was Ed Roberts and people back in that era, Judy Heumann. It was a lot of people were out of that kind of world, fighting for their rights. And ADAPT, a lot of the people were actually people that did not go to school, that just wanted to live in the community. Some of them were from the institutions that really wanted to stay in the community and live in the community after they got out. And they were the, I call them the real grassroots. They would be in the trenches. They would try to how they would pay their way was and different. They would put on fun runs. They would have bake sales. They would sometimes dress up in Santa Claus outfits and ask for change, and that's how they would come get to the actions. There was no big companies that were giving them money. There were no mom and pop. If they had mom and pop, were giving them their monies. These are people that were on SSI. I mean, the grassroots were made up of amazing diversity of people, and
Of all
there's
ages,
some
yeah, all
more,
ages and all backgrounds, yeah.
all ages, all backgrounds, and there's one of my favorite stories is this of Ryan here, and the you can see him on the sidewalk right there. He's young man at that time, and Diane and I were driving a group down to this action, and his mother was with him, and she said, "Well, at some point, we'll let you, you know, get in front of that bus, and it's up to you. Then you could, you know, even get arrested at that point." He got out of our van, and he went right for the bus. And there was I have a great picture of his father coming down and seeing him for the first time at an action in front of the bus. You know, you're right. All ages were involved in this. And so, I mean, this is not one of the things about greyhounds is don't turn diesels off in these big vehicles when you're running and wanting to get them going. And so it wasn't the easiest thing to do to crawl under and put your body by the wheels, because they were these buses were running. And you can, as people behind the exhaust system could attest to.
Yeah, pretty smelly. But this is
Yeah.
Bill Bolt. There on the left.
And Randy
Bill Bolt.
Horton. Yes,
Randy
Bill
Horton.
Bolte and Randy Horton from LA.
Mhm. And
Putting their
yeah,
lives at stake.
Yeah, putting their lives at stake. Yeah. So it's pretty amazing. This is Montreal when Adapt went international. The APTA up there,
Yes.
that was the American Public Transportation Association.
Association.
For those that don't know.
Yes. And a lot of the actions that Adapt did was from out of their conventions that they would have around the U.S. Some were regionals and some were national. And this was a national one. They thought this was after years of us hitting them in all the places in the U.S. And they thought, we'll go to Montreal. Then we won't have to deal with Adapt. Well, Adapt went to Montreal also. And this is a great, that was a great photo. You can see the, on one side of all the police, and that was in front of the Queen Elizabeth Hotel. And just, I had a KPFA radio press badge at that point, and I followed these policemen when they first came. They all had these gigantic bags on their back, and I couldn't understand what they were. And I was led into the Queen Elizabeth and walked to the room that they were all putting their bags down. And one of the guys came a machine gun, a rifle, and some a billy club. It was just, oh my God, you know, they were scared of us, the police, because the American Public Transportation APTA Association had said that we were Vietnam vets, and that we had spikes on our chairs, and we were there to cripple them. And I mean, they were so scared that they actually rented a helicopter. They hadn't had a helicopter since the French insurrection years before that. So that's probably where they had their armory too. But we followed them. We followed them in the rain. It rained a lot up there. There's another picture of the barricade on the right-hand side. Now, this is an interesting photo because this is an intersection, and the police said, "Oh, you know, here's a big intersection. Let's just get the gates and make sure just round them up, and we'll put them in here." And without thinking, they caused the largest roadblock.
Was,
Traffic
yeah.
congestion, and sometimes the police think they have the best idea to control us, and there's always something that we can do. I loved once going up to the Queen Elizabeth. They were following us, and they had like 7 police cars, and we had broken up into 3 or 4 different groups, and one group, I was with one group that we went up, and we had these police cars following us, and so all we had to do, we turned a left down the into the sidewalk, but it was a one-way street, so the police couldn't go up it, and so we lost all the police, within a block. They were gone. Always different ways of getting around the police. They think they can really find us. I mean, actually, it started out, the first demonstration we had in Montreal, we're at YWCA or YMCA, and we had 17 cop cars around waiting for us when we get out, so we didn't do anything. Well, Wade Blank had found out that in the basement, we could take the elevator down to the basement, and then they had this ramp that went up into the alley, and so the police weren't in the alley, they just thought we were going to come out the front or whatever, and we all got out the back and went from alley to alley, three blocks away to the hotel, and captured the hotel where APTA was staying. So it's always an interesting time. And this picture right here is the underground subway, and this is right after the judge had told us that ADAPT could not participate in demonstrations in the island of Montreal. So, of course, we just said, okay. So what we did is we captured a subway station that went to Montreal. So we didn't even have to go to Montreal to stop Montreal's transit. This is some more of the police in Montreal. There's Lilybeth Navarro.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, she's the head of the CIL in Los Angeles right now. I just spoke to her last night, actually. But this kind of shows, they didn't really know how to contain you guys, other than take you out of your chairs or whatever. So they're strapping her up. I mean, it's just amazing. Early on, the police didn't really know what to do. I mean, as far as dealing with those damn crippled people,
Right, and so, sometimes it was really dangerous too, as you could probably see. Especially, they didn't know about people that had spastic movements, as in CP, or just spasms,
or people who need to cath every couple hours, or empty leg bags, or any of that.
Yeah.
So they had no idea the stuff we had to go through.
Plants. Yeah.
So many plants died at hotels because of people emptying leg bags.
Right. They wouldn't let us.
Yeah. Well, I think that happened in Ohio, actually. They said they told Bob Kafka he couldn't come back to Ohio because of that. So let's move on to this is Paul Longmore. You were talking about Paul a little while ago, a man who was born with polio, or not born with polio, but contracted polio and lost the ability to use his arms. He wanted to be a historian. Paul,
Yeah,
right here. Go ahead.
right. He had just written a book, actually. I mean, throughout this
I apologize for the audio.
movie, throughout the 80s, there were so many other different aspects of disabilities. ADAPT said, okay, we'll just do, we were made up of a whole bunch of people that were from all over the US and in different cities. And in the different cities, we had other fights also. It's just ADAPT. Twice a year, got together and did a national action, a national civil rights action that up until last year was done every year. It was one of the longest, civil disobedience active groups as such. To do that, all that. I mean, that was one of the most powerful things to happen in the movement. But other things were happening. There were things you couldn't go to work. You couldn't actually work and get money, and you had to. Then you would lose your money to pay the attendance from SSDI, or you would have to give money back to things. Things were just getting way out of control. And for Paul, he could write a book, but all of his earnings from the book would have to be given to the government. So
Right.
he ended up with a protest. And go ahead, you say the rest. You know.
Well, Paul Longmore was
that.
actually, he was a professor of history and director of the Institute of Disability at San Francisco State University. And, he wanted to be a professor, he wanted to teach and all of that, but he was also living on SSDI and utilized that money and the Medicaid and all of that. So the disincentives back then to go to work were horrendous. And a lot of us out here with disabilities are dealing with that. And still to this day have issues with that. But yeah, he went and he had written this book, The Invention of George Washington, and he actually came out one day. This was in October 18th of 88. And he was in front of the federal building in LA, and he held a protest, and about 40 people showed up, and he burned his book. And, everybody wanted to go to work. These were some of the people that were there. They really wanted to just go to work, but the disincentives, kept people from doing that. If they get a job, they had to pay down their amount to SSI. So it was basically perpetuating poverty. And, back at that time, and even today, when you're looking at academia, if you're a professor, you publish or perish, but back then with him, it was publish and perish. It's kind of a sad, just one of the many things that we've had to struggle for. And here you are. We're going. I can't read where this is, but this is Sparks, heading into Sparks, Utah to do an action. And again, APTA. They were at the Nugget. They were staying at the Nugget, and so we went there and got into a bit of a ruckus.
Yes, they sure. And it seemed like the casino was their security was really heavy. Now I can say, not the typical security guards. They were strong. They looked like they could have been ex-mafia men. The retirement, I don't know. But it was we actually had some injuries at that time.
A broken leg, I know. Somebody broke their leg. Yeah. So here's ET being arrested.
And Frank Lozano is the other person.
Yeah. And we move on to Philadelphia. And this was, they'd come here for the Burnley versus Adapt decision, I believe, back when the federal government was really trying to keep lifts from being mandated on public buses, and as well the paratransit system that we now know and appreciate and use every day was also being argued. They were saying it's you know, it's a duplication of services and all of that. So there was a lot going on. And again, this goes back to street theater. You've got Bob Kafka there with the big beard on the right, and Diane in the middle, and a few other
and
folks.
to the right, and to the with a tri hat on the right. That's Mark Johnson right there.
All the way over in the power chair. Yeah.
Yeah. Facing Bob. Yeah. Actually, it was kind of interesting. That's the first time we flew the flag right there. First disability flag. And what was interesting there is that you can see it in the background at the Liberty Bell. But that flag was made, actually, Diane Coleman there, and Babs
Johnson.
Babs Johnson, and Mike Allberger. Mike and I had gone out and got an American flag, a really nice one, Army surplus store. We got it back, put it on the table, and we said, gosh, let's take the stars off and do something with them. We didn't know what we were going to come up with, actually. But we're just, all of a sudden someone said, well, let's just do the little stick man, with the chair, and it kind of worked out. So
yeah, it sure did.
And it was kind of fun. We took a little knives and stitched the stars, and I was really getting into doing all that, and all of a sudden I jump up and I said, oh shoot, this is Betty Ross. I better get my camera, So I ran and got my camera, and got some really great pictures of us making that flag. But,
so this is moving on to.
That's Atlanta, another APTA experience. Definitely had a lot of good people there. There we are, stopping the buses again.
Yeah, it only takes a couple of chairs to stop a bus, so that was a pretty successful tool in the bag. Another great tool is you guys really upped your game in how you would keep from being taken off the buses. These are titanium bike locks that you can't just come up with a bolt cutter and take off. They just don't come off that easily.
No, our titanium necklaces, we used to call them. And Bob Kafka and Mike Allberger. And this was at a federal building. And they were there for I don't know how many hours. And what's really funny about this photo is that the cops couldn't do anything. They had one of the janitorial persons came by and said, do you want me to help you with this situation? And the police right at first said, no, we got it. I said, are you sure? And they kind of walked away, came back and said, I can get those off, and then the final police says, okay. And so he takes this little screwdriver out of his pocket, his front pocket, in a plastic cover, of course, and goes to that door, and there's a screw right by the where the handle is attached, and he just unscrews that little handle and slips the lock right off. So after hours and hours of them being there, they got moved by a janitor with a screwdriver. And this is on the left. This is taking people out of the building. This is they started to take people out of the buildings. Then it became kind of wet, and it was rainy. This is where it was real interesting, because Wade called Evan Kemp, who was doing commissioner of the EEOC under Bush, and who was really a person that helped us so much, really understood what was happening, could actually relay what was not only happening right now when Wade called, but also, throughout the ADA history. He had the ear of the president more than anyone else, in our movement. And well, anyhow, Wade called Evan, and Evan got a hold of the special counsel to the president, and then he got a hold of the president and told him that there were people that were being dragged out in the rain down in Atlanta at the Russell Federal Building, and then he called down and said, "Let those people back in. Let them stay there the night if they want to." And so we ended up back into the Federal Building by the order of the president.
So you
And
guys had a big.
We woke up that morning with people walking over us, because we slept on the floor at that point. This is on the left. Dallas. That was in Dallas, right?
Yep.
Danny is being dragged off from the Greyhound station. On the right is in could be Atlanta, could be, I think it was Atlanta too. Yeah. Another takeover of a Greyhound bus where Bob's has a sign, "Separate is never equal."
Mm-hmm. And all of this, we're getting really close to the big days. This is back out in Los Angeles. There in the front on the left is Nancy Becker Kennedy, the comedian, and Barb Waxman and others. And I guess, one of the beautiful things about wheelchairs is they can really fill a space. And so if you ever wondered how many wheelchairs does it take to fill a hallway, well, here you go. You got this.
This definitely was a, you can see there's a chain that is wrapped all around him, and there's no way anyone was going to go anywhere in that hallway at all. I mean,
so, and then they were fighting budget cuts back then. So.
Yeah, that was in front of Duke Majan's, he was the governor. That was his LA office building.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, there were so many other things that were happening. The budget cuts back then were something that was affecting the attendance. Having good attendance at that point, the pay at that point.
Mm-hmm. And attendant care became a big deal after the ADA as well. I mean, we're only going up to the ADA, but so much more happened after Olmsted, all of that stuff. But here we are. This is really the beginning of the big day in our history that sometimes brings tears to my eyes, because this was the day that 700 people gathered. This was the ADAPT Wheels of Justice action, and nobody really knew what was going to happen this day, but it happened, and here we are. Everybody's starting to march from the White House to the Capitol building.
Yeah. This is right before you get this, like when you come up from Pennsylvania Avenue to the White House. I mean, to the Capitol. I was up on the Capitol steps at this point. I'm taking a shot, and you can see a whole. I mean, there's Akeem Jordan is there, Tom Harkin, see Evan Kemp Jr. as well as
Justin Dart.
You just had a whole. I mean, there's a lot of people that from all over.
I see Bob Williams and his beret on below his little cap. Yep. There's a lot of folks here. So, and here's another one of your iconic shots.
That was right from the White House. getting everyone together. We had George Roberts with "We Shall Overcome." It was one of the original persons that
The Gang of 19.
came out of the nursing home institution in Denver. And then right next to him by the sign, there's Evan Kemp Jr. in the little background
in the white,
there.
Yep, the white
in the
shirt
white
and the
shirt.
tie.
Then you had Stephanie Thomas with a sign, "Accesses the Civil Right." And then right above her hair, is Justin Dart. And you had right next to her was Frank Lozano and his dog Frazier.
Hey, Frazier.
And right behind Frazier is Michael Winters. And right behind, I just saw right behind Frank is Janine Bertram Kemp.
Yeah, married to Evan. She's still very active in the movement.
Yeah.
And the little one in the chair over here?
Yeah, you have
all know Jennifer.
You have Jennifer, her sister, and of course I had to like this picture because right behind pushing on Jennifer is my mother. Pushing. So I guess I have to like this picture. But no, it's definitely, it was a powerful march right from the White House to the Capitol, where the Congress was in session, was in conference, when the two sides were actually trying to figure out what was going to be in that bill. It was going to be in the ADA. And God, it was so important for us to do this. It was the right time to do all of this. And here we had a lot of speakers. And this is a really neat photo. This is actually one of Justin's favorite photos. Not because he's in it, because of all his comrades around it, the patriots of ADA. He just, one of his favorite photos because of that. And we had speakers. We had Pat Schroeder. We had Major Owens. We had
King Jordan.
Evan Kemp Jr. We had Tom Harkin, Paul Miller. We had so many, Mike Allberger. Was great. It was a great show of unity and force. I mean, this is, you've got to remember that there were so many people that made up the ADA. It was like there were so many rings on a pitchfork that got us to here. We had legislative people working that, but one of the biggest things was one of the things that Justin did that was really nice about gathering the grassroots support was that he and Yoshiko went around the U.S. twice to gather support. He did the diaries. I was called now anyhow, there were diaries of how people felt and about what was happening, and brought them to. But he gathered that support. He gathered that. Helped gather that support that we all needed.
It built the momentum. Yeah, it built the momentum.
Yes.
And so then right after these talks, after the march, after the talks, this is all on March 12th, 1990, then came the crawl. And people
came the crawl.
The spontaneous action.
This is what I call this is what I call the shot that was heard around the world in the disability movement. This is a couple of days later. I had a friend that came back from Paris, and he said on Parisian television he saw us crawling up the Capitol. It was it not only did it spark our self movement that we had, but it also there was a movement around the U.S. and to see that we could do something, you know, it really meant a lot to a lot of people with disabilities worldwide. But this definitely, this right here, not only did it hit the world, but it hit what was inside the Capitol, because what we were doing, the people, the congressmen inside knew exactly what we were doing, what was happening. And in the press that we were getting it. And in this picture, you have Jennifer, Keelan, my niece, and and Michael Winter. Actually, he turned around at this point and he was going to stop. He said, "I'm just too tired." And then he saw Jennifer crawling past him and said, "Oh, shoot, I can't let that happen."
And Jennifer wasn't even supposed to climb that day. I mean, she was told by some of the people in the action to not do this, but Wade came up and Justin, and they told her, you want to do that, you go climb those stairs. And then Wade put his arm around her mom, Cynthia, and said, "Cynthia, let's go for a walk for a minute." You know, and away went Jennifer up the steps. So that was an amazing thing. And actually, Jennifer is right now, there's a book out called All the Way to the Top, a children's book written about her and this exact crawl. So here we have more folks climbing on their way up.
Yep.
And then your iconic shot that is probably the most in demand of all your photos is this one of Shayla Jackson.
Tommy Malone.
Tommy Malone from Kentucky.
Yeah.
Yep, working their way up with that Capitol building in the background. So this was an event.
It says a lot. Yeah, I mean, it's a photo that says a lot. It says exactly where we were at the time, you know.
Yeah, the promised land was right up there, but you had to get there. Yeah. So, and then here's Cynthia hugging Jennifer when she made it up to the last step. So she made it up, and this is one of my absolute favorite Tom Olin photos. Pretty powerful stuff, Tom. I mean, and Jennifer as a child and what she has done, I've heard from so many kids today yet are still inspired by this young lady that climbed the steps at, 7 years old. Just is amazing. Just an amazing shot.
Right. And she's going around, she's actually going around the U.S. Well, right now we're zooming around the U.S. And she is also, out there encouraging young people. She's doing a lot of readings from the book you had mentioned, all the way to the top. Yeah.
And she's actually coming to a little plug for our youth leadership program at the Ability Center. She's going to be one of our speakers this summer. So, and then of course, when they all got to the top of the steps, they were all sent to go take letters on statements to folks, Steny Hoyer and others that were a part of those committees, to let them know that we were here and we climbed the steps. And this is the next day. This is when ADAPT went in and took over the rotunda for a number of hours before the arrest started. I think 104 people ended up being arrested here. But you can see here they are in the rotunda, and there's Stephanie Thomas right in the middle, another one of your iconic shots.
Yeah, yes. And of course, we didn't all go in at once. There were many different entrances that you could go to, some accessible, some not. But and you can even go underneath from one of the government buildings to another through their little
tunnels,
and so we all split up, and a lot of it, we had tour guides. You'd have maybe 10 people on a tour, and I was on one, and so we finally got to the rotunda, and the tour guide turns around after he's seen all these people in chairs. He turns around, looks at us, and he says, "Well, I don't think you're here for the tour, are you?" Just smiled and laughed, and no, you're right.
Yeah.
And the thing about, you can't chant in this in the rotunda, or it's arrestable. And at the time, I mean, like I said, at this point, you had both houses. I mean, the House and the Senate in conference, and you could hear when we chanted. Anyone in that U.S. Capitol could hear us. And we had a couple of people come. I mean, there's a Steny Hoyer up here,
in
and
the black suit.
you could, yeah, black suit. After he gave a talk, he just he kind of lowered his head and whispered to a couple of people. He said, keep that up. Everyone can hear you. Everyone can hear you. Keep it up. Didn't say it publicly at that point. It's not a good thing. I mean, at this time, they wanted to, you know, they were thinking about not doing, having epilepsy part of the disability. You know, AIDS was going to be a part of the disability. I mean, one of the greatest things is when we did come together, the grassroots, our advocates, our DC advocates, our other advocates. One of the greatest things is that we said, when they said, okay, they're going to compromise, we said, no way are we going to compromise. We're going to be here until you don't compromise, you know. And we were powerful. It was not politics as usual, and especially it was not politics as they knew, you know, people with disabilities. You know, we were the out of sight, out of mind, and they could do anything to us. You know, it wasn't that happening, and we took over congressional offices. You know,
This here is Schuster's office. This was the last
yes.
takeover there, and of course, all of this led to this. Our big day, Washington, D.C., July 26, 1990. Here you've got Evan Kemp in the gray suit to the president's right. You've got Justin, grandfather of the ADA, to the left. You've got Reverend Wilkie in the back. And my mind is escaping me on
Sandy Perino.
Yeah, Sandy Perino. Yeah. So this was our day. Let the shameful walls of exclusion come tumbling down. That was our day. And so this is how far we went, and the work continues. This is one of my favorite shots too. This is from Las Vegas.
Yeah, we definitely have not done. I mean, we're not done with the ADA. The ADA is a fluid thing. We want, you know, there's it has to say something for us at this time. And right now, people are trying to take the teeth out of it, and we need to teeth more into it right now, especially right now. You know, we just found out, you know, through the COVID era, you know, how less we have. We all of a sudden woke up one morning and people weren't thinking about us, didn't care about us, and to the point that we're having hundreds and hundreds of people die in nursing homes right now. During this picture that we have right up, you know, not only does it, you know, I love it, and it really means that, you know, our movement is still a movement and we need to go on. But also, you know, here we have redirect 25% of institutional money that was going into nursing homes and other places, into the community. Well, we actually, you know, from that time we shot this picture and on, we've gotten more. Our movement hasn't stopped. Our movement, this movement right here, got money follows the person, you know, into effect, which is one of the best ways to get people into the community from institutions. You know, one of the great things that we, you know, it's things. The movement can't stop, you know, because why, and I'm glad it didn't stop. We wouldn't have had the Helen L case that Adapt and Steve Gold and all did, and that was a precursor to the Olmsted case. And the Olmsted case, you know, was definitely got our people out of institutions, and still is getting out of institutions. But we need to put teeth in that. You know, we have a lot to go, and we need to come together. You know, definitely. That was one of the greatest things about the ADA. It was how we, as a disability community, came together. Before the ADA, we had groups doing things. We had the blind, you know, getting what they needed to get, the deaf getting what they needed to get, and we had the IED organization getting what they want to get. You know, the psychiatric survivors, you know, have always been on the edge and are still fighting for what they need, and deinstitutionalization and then back into the community, out of state hospitals. You know, there's a lot to be done, and we've got to do it together. If we can do that because of the ADA, then we can do that with where we're at right now. And where we're at right now is not a great place right now. We're not listened to right now. You know, right now it's getting the economy back together. You know, our civil rights is not as little. It's not as important right now, you know, to the mainstream politics, and we need our voices.
Yeah. But, you know, we were precursors to the whole issue that we're seeing right now unfold with congregate living. A lot of people are dying in congregate living. If we just had more community-based living, we'd probably have a lot less people dying these days. So, Tom, I just want to, first off, I want to thank the Ability Center for hosting this webinar. I want to thank them for their 100 years of dedication and service to people with disabilities. I want to thank the Wardham Candidate Center for Special Collections for hosting your archive and allowing me to work on it. I want to thank all the folks, you and all the folks out there, our disability patriots and warriors who put their hearts, souls, and lives on the line for all that we have today. And on behalf of everybody watching, thank you, Tom, for being our eyes and capturing the moments and the struggles that have brought us to here. So you were talking about Olmsted. This last slide shows Lois Curtis, one of the two in the Olmsted decision, welcoming her guests into her brand new home as she got out of the institution. So that's a wonderful thing. So happy 30th anniversary, ADA. Thank you, Tom, for being a part of this. I'm so happy that you're my friend and my brother from another mother. And I also want to say happy early birthday. I know your birthday's next week, so happy birthday to you. And thanks a lot. Yeah, thanks for doing this. We'll see you later. Love you.